every young adult in Israel from the age of 18 to 21. I think women girls from eight, I don't even want to call them women because it's girls
Mhm.
from 18 to 20, and young men are from 18 to 21. It's mandatory to go to the army, but religious ultra-Orthodox um, sector doesn't doesn't enlist in the army. They have a ptol. A ptol is, what is that word in like, how would you say ptol in
There's
English?
a word. There certainly is a word for it. It's just escaping both of us. And that law goes back to Ben Gurion when he founded the state, that he wanted to permit, or he was convinced to permit students of who are learning Torah to be exempt from the army, an exemption. There it goes, right?
Like,
To be
yes.
to
It's such a
be
basic word that I forgot.
to be exempt from the army. At that time, there were 400 students. And this just has ballooned to tens of thousands. I'm not really sure how many. Um, and what started really as a kind of privilege has turned into a what's seen as a an obligation of the state to sustain Haredi families, because they not only get a patur from the army, because they're afraid that they are going to, by going to the army, this is what their teachers tell them, if they go into the army, they're going to go off the derech. So that's
Right.
in the ultra-Orthodox world, that's the worst possible thing, for your child to go off the derech. Now, I was in this world, and they refer to kids as sug aleph and sug bet, as if they were pieces of fruit sometimes. This would be in shidduchim, in trying to marry people off. So I'm just saying this is a world in which going into the army is really a blemish. It's a blemish on the family. It's an abandonment of Torah values. Now, there must be 30 or 40,000 kids in yeshiva now. And, many of them, and I know many of them, they are very serious learners, and they devote their whole lives to it, and their families devote their lives to it, and they are committed to the lifestyle that they're leading. I'm not saying they should get money that they get, but they do use it for the purpose whatever. I mean, and just there are tons of people who are just, so I used to walk up to kids in my neighborhood and say, what are you're smoking cigarettes, go to the army. It's good that I don't live there anymore, because I would get into fights.
I think it's what is happening is that there are so many mothers my age
Yeah.
who don't sleep at night
Mhm.
because
For
their
sure.
their sons are in the army, and we both know people personally who have sons in the army,
We
and
know people
just
who
the
are going.
idea that they
We go back. We know people who have gone back into Miluim for the fourth or fifth time.
Yeah, but I'm not talking, but this is, I'm trying to just draw a comparison between
Mm.
those kids who are at the yeshiva and the kids who are fighting, at the army, and their mothers, because I can relate to the mothers. And I don't, a yeshiva boy's mother sleeps very well at night. She's just very calm because nothing is happening to her son, as you know, and I'm not saying that, just being in the yeshiva is a bad thing. But I'm saying that when, a mother in Tel Aviv doesn't sleep a wink at night because she's on, antidepressants because she's so scared and anxious about her son, that's when, the rift starts. And that's where, the resentment starts.
I think the reason we started talking about this, which we didn't even go into, was that the four of the five soldiers that were killed yesterday were in that ultra-Orthodox, that Haredi brigade, which I think you said was called Netzach Yisrael, which means, the victory of Israel. So, and these go like 10 years back, these Haredi kids who go into the army?
These are usually, I mean, from what I know, and again, this is, it's very celebrated because it's very special to have that sort of brigade of ultra Orthodox or ultra Haredi soldiers. Usually they're um, married, they have children. I mean, the ages is like 20s, but they're like older than just, the soldiers who come in when they're 18 years old. So they're much more mature. And it's like, and all of them have, like a very interesting story because some of them are ostracized from their families, from their communities. It just makes everything kind of rise to the top, this anger. And we were talking about, if I look at it, I mean, it's people don't understand that it's a major issue right now. And it's also very interesting that if the government will fall or whatever and we'll have an early election, it's not because of the war in Gaza, it's because of that. It's because of this um idea or this law that seems, just ridiculous that some children, I call them children, go to the army and some don't because of their religion. And so where's the fairness? And especially now when we
It's even worse than you're saying because you said it's an issue, and the police have been spending ta or using our taxpayer dollars at Haredi demonstrations, and you would think that they would have somehow, just like the social tact. They're out closing highways about the Haredi draft. And I think what you're pointing to also is that so much of the political world today, and for years, depends upon the Haredim, and that's why they have this power. Are they gonna, I mean, they've always been kind of essential to the coalitions that get formed. But I think, I mean, from my sense of things, is that the anger is so great now across the sectors that that's finished. Although I've been so wrong about Israeli politics so many times.
I think it's really interesting that it's coming from you, that you feel that it's almost like you're more angry than me about
Yeah,
this. And
because
and
I
it's
was
it's
inside that world. I
interesting.
know what it is. I know the good things and I know the bad things. So and this is a case just of why it bothers me so much. It's a case of bad teachers. Milton, his whole everything in his poetic and prose career is about teaching in some way. And the people that he despises most, they happen to be, priests, are bad teachers. And they're bad teachers because they corrupt young people. And I think that's a huge tragedy is that there are, 20 or 30 years ago, maybe Haredim didn't feel Israelis. In Bayit Vagan, where we used to live, most, maybe there are 10 or 20% of the crazies. But most people feel Israelis. And I think, the Rosh Yeshivas have an opportunity to tap into that and let them feel courage, let them feel responsibility. I mean, I know it's not easy, and I'm not doing it. So it's much easier for me to talk about it. But I think they're just losing such an opportunity to be part of the culture now because they all believe, they all go to their shelters. One thing that I would never tolerate in Bayit Vagan is anybody who does not have a child in the army. I don't want to talk to about politics. You're just disqualified. I mean, I don't have a child in the army, but I never say anything, right? I know the boundaries. I know to stay in my lane. But it's an odd sociological thing because they're all right wing. They all believe in the state. They all believe in this. They believe in that. I'm like, shut your mouth. Join the army.
There was a skit in a very popular show in Israel. Like I mean, it's funny. It's called a very leftist show.
Mm.
They're very satirical, but whatever. It was a very famous skit, and I think it was at the beginning of the war where people don't realize that when you're a reservist, you do many, many things. So it's not like you just go and fight. So some reservists they call them, I forgot the name. It's the people who come to announce the death of a soldier.
Yeah.
I used to work with one who was, and I remember I was like a young waitress and he was a bartender. And I mean, he was 25 or 26 and he had a beeper. I mean, that was when we had beepers, and he was one of those people who would wait. And his job was as a reservist when he was like, there was like 2 weeks of, in a year where he would go and he would be one of those people who come, knocking on the door and just announce, the death of a soldier. That was his job as a reservist. And the perks of it was that he only worked, he only enlisted for like a week a year because it's such a horrifying job. But I just remember having, and he was such a goofball. It's kind of hard to connect those two because it's
Well,
such
I
it
was
weighs.
thinking it's such a generic scene in American movies where the two officers show up in uniform and go to the house of the parents of the person who was killed. But that doesn't sound at all like the bartender you're mentioning.
No, it's just I just had this flashback of just remembering that, that's what he did, like, for a week. So he was on call for a week. And
That's crazy.
as he was bartending, I think it was like a Mexican, a bar also had like, it's in the middle of Florentine in Tel Aviv. It was like
Mm,
a million years ago. But there's a skit. So what I was saying, that there was a skit at the beginning of the war where there are two of those people who come in, like you said, like the generic, they're in uniforms and they were knocking on the door. And as an Israeli, you see that, those two, and you realize that they're coming to announce the death of a soldier. And
mm.
then, the door opens up and there's two religious people, and they're like, oh, you know, it's the wrong address. Like, because there's no possibility that they would be
That's
burdened, or,
that is so
so for them
sharp.
it was just, and it was so powerful and so
Yeah.
shocking because they just open up and there were two religious, like really religious people, and you just know that it's going to pass them over, right? It's like, pass over their house because so I mean, I just remember that that skit was just very controversial,
Mm.
and people were complaining that it's hurting their feelings,
Badly.
but
I mean, that
it
just
was
I mean
such a
nothing
true
to do.
tale of just everything that is Israeli in that small skit in regards to that particular subject. So I don't think people realize how dividing this subject is in Israeli
Because
politics.
the
This is
army,
not just, in the minority.
yeah,
This government could fall because of that. And
ridiculous.
again, not the Gaza war or not whatever is happening there, but because do you enlist or not enlist Haredi, young people from the age of 20, from 18 to 25 or 28. I don't remember exactly the law.
The
Reality.
extent to which the government also allows this to be a distraction, I mean, that's on Bibi. I mean, it's perverse that there's so much energy and time. On the political side, it's making Smotrich and Ben Gvir happy. They have to be happy with the political deals, or they'll walk out sulking. I mean, they're only a few people, but they control the government on one hand, and then on the other side are the religious people who have much more clout. And Bibi is constantly appeasing them, constantly. So I'm asking you
Right,
really,
but that's the
politics.
system.
That's
So, do
politics,
you
yeah.
blame the people or the system? The system
That's
allows
right.
this to happen. It could go the other way, even though it never does, but it could go the other way. I
See, and
don't,
I also want to
and I
say
also
this is,
look, I try,
yeah.
I mean, I look at it, I mean, I mean, of course, like you said, there is the one, who don't really learn the Torah and smoke. So why don't they go? I mean, I understand that in their thinking, it is they're doing something, their prayers. I mean, at least that's what they're telling us, as in why we're not in the army. We're doing something noble. We're doing, the real Jewish,
Something that is
you know,
essential to something that is essential to Klal Yisrael, which it is, but it's turned into a sociological deformity. That's the problem. And it's also undermined the fundamental message of what it's supposed to do. In America, in communities, they have things called kollels. They have them here also. But the kollels here, you go someplace and you study among a billion other people, and then you go home. The kollels in America are you send 10 or 15 kids, their kids and their wives, it's married couples, and they learn every day, but they go out into the community. Their basic function is to be part of the community in whatever way that means. And that's what's not happening here at all. We're not doing anything. We can't say, as we sit alone in the Beit Midrash, we're doing something that is incredibly important, which it is, and then not relate to anything that's happening outside of you and seeing anybody else's needs. And that's what's happening. And the responsibility now of learning, we don't need 40. We need people to go back and see their families. We need people to start to breathe after this trauma. That's what people also don't realize. That, these kids are still on Halloween. The community I live in right now,
yeah.
half the guys are on Halloween, the other half come to shul with guns. You can say it's a militaristic culture, but I wouldn't want to be part of that. Meaning not because I'm not part of them, because they are realizing their responsibility in ways that Haredi do not show up for. And it's very frustrating. But I think again, the one thing of hope is it's the system. And the kids, I mean, this is the sad part, are victims of that system. But just like you would say the leadership in Israel politically has to go, and this will never happen in the Haredi world, not in the short term. They have to go because it's them. They're holding on to power.
There has to be a separation of state and religion. I mean,
Yeah.
it's to me,
Church and
it's
state, yeah.
basic.
Yeah,
Right,
but we both believe in this. I mean, that's basically we do. I mean, it's the paradox is that Israel is both a Jewish and democratic state,
right.
and the
By
problem.
definition, it's a Jewish democratic state. I mean,
So that's Jewish, which takes people on the right very far right, and democratic, which takes people on the left very far left. So they forget each other. But what we're trying to do is to have both. I wrote to somebody yesterday. I said, we believe in a Jewish and democratic future, and both of those are in bold. Both, meaning we're not saying one over the other. And it's impossible. It's a paradox. It does. I mean, America is a Christian country also. That's kind of one of the great revelations, theory in the 80s and 90s. Oh, America is also a Christian country. We get that. But, so it's a delicate balance. America does it well. They have a constitution. We don't have one. That's why it's
right,
harder.
which is also insane, which is just
Yep.
insane. I mean,
Yeah, because
it's
it makes the courts vulnerable because they just say we're acting on reason, which is problematic because reason can lead you in different directions. If they had a
right.
constitution, then they could say this is the basis of it.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, again, there is, again, people forget, but there was an uproar, before, October 7th, and things in this country, were very much intense, and there was a feeling that this country is divided, which was, it's in the left and the right. There were talk about Yehuda versus Israel, which is,
Oh, yeah,
it used
it's
to be
crazy,
Israel
right?
used to be
Yeah, let's
divided.
go
Yeah, I
back to a
remember I
divided
saw.
Israel. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, they wanted to divide those, the people, it was just, it was that insane. People were talking about it. And then there was, there's a talk that, our enemies saw this divide, they saw this, just the intensity of hatred, of just, being in conflict, and they seized upon it. That's also, one of the talk. I mean, I don't even know if that's true or not true. I mean, it's not
A
like they,
former
they rested.
a former army general said this to me 6 months before October 7th. And she said exactly this, and you remember, and for us it's a cliche, that the big question, Erev Simchat Torah, was there going to be violence at the mixed minyan in Tel Aviv, which they were having in this public space? That was the big existential issue that we were facing.
Just, yeah, I just remember those times. Those were not
Right,
happy
and
times.
that was horrible, and that was horrible, and now it's much more horrible. But at least
It can
yeah,
get worse. Our lesson for today can only it can always get worse. It,
that's
it's just, and it's funny. There's like some dark jokes where everybody's like, okay, so what next? What next? Like aliens, floods, like what's next? Like what is in store for us? We don't know. I mean, my bet is on tornado. I think we'll get a
tornado.
tornado.
Tornadoes would be very unusual, though.
It's
That
very
would re
American to get a tornado, I know, but I want to be, I think tornadoes are,
well,
I don't
uh,
know, magical. We've never had a tornado in Israel. I mean, there are no, I don't think you know what? I don't know. I never investigated that, but I don't recall having a tornado in Israel.
that's not one of the
So,
major traumas you've undergone is having a major tornado in Israel.
right, tornado and aliens. I think, and any, everything else was done. So I just, I mean, we laugh about it, but it's almost like every day we wake up and we brace ourselves for something bad. It's like, right? I mean, there's always like you wake up, you go to the phone. I mean, at least that's what I do every day. I mean, Friday, Saturday, and you go to the phone and you're like, what is
Is that
happening?
the
Like
person?
something bad must have happened.
I always try to cushion things by checking the baseball scores, and if the Mets win, I watch the highlights, and then I watch the
No,
news.
it's not what we do. We just, I check the regular news outlet. And I go through five of them. I don't know how other people in other countries do. Maybe they just have one. In Israel, there's such a small country, but there's like six, five
So
or
what are
six.
they?
So I go through
What are
each.
they? What are they?
They're Ma'ariv, Mako, Ynet,
Well,
Wala,
I want
and
politics then.
Haaretz. So there's
So
five.
Pirates we know is super left, right?
I do the Haaretz. I do Wala, Ynet, Ma'ariv, and Mako are all like, I think run by the
And
same
Makor
people.
Rishon is
It's the
right wing,
same news.
right? Makor
Mako
Rishon
Rishon,
is
I don't do. I
Uh,
don't do Makol Bishon.
I wouldn't
I think
either.
Makol Bishon is too, it's like, it's, I don't know, like I don't, it's not in one of my, and I literally check each and every one of them. And like I said, it's not like any of them are A, objective, B, have anybody worth really reading, like specifically. I don't go into one person. I'm like, I want to read,
What
their
headlines?
point of view.
Right.
It's just, it's so, to me, they're all mainstream media in Israel is just so bad in its, depiction of what's happening. Bad as in not doing their job, not as bad because they don't know how to write. It's just they're not doing really their job. I don't, I'm just getting information. It's almost reading like a gossip blog of what's happening in Israel. There's no real stand, there's nothing. Um, Haaretz tries, but then he tries, they try too hard almost. So that's how I look at things. But at least they're trying there. And then you just, you try, you read, you try not to get depressed. You get depressed and then you just try to live. I don't know. I think that's our daily routine. By the end of the day, we might have some sort of, of just a relaxing kind of mode just because you're bracing yourself for the next day. There's that cycle that's constantly happening. What's going to happen next? Nobody is in charge. Nobody knows what they're doing.
I think you're giving words to like how I've been feeling. It's good because at the moments of relaxation, though, for me, it's not, it's more towards late evening than late afternoon. But
That your peak is at like late
like
evening, or
I
is
try to just chill out by the end of the day to just have some sense of not being constantly under assault.
right. But most people, not me because I don't watch the news, but most people like
Yeah,
my
one second. Can we
dad
just
and
go?
my
Can we
parents,
just
for
can we
example.
pause here for can we pause here for a second? You don't watch the news, but you get as much news on your phone as anybody else.
Right. No, but it's interesting that at 8 o'clock at night,
Ah,
is where most people get their information. They
right,
tune in at 8 o'clock at night. So
right.
as opposed to your, trying to just kind of I
Curating
don't
your
know,
own.
de-stress. For them,
Right.
it's 8 o'clock, you
Ah,
sit, you watch. It's how people divide their time and because if you think about it, the news surrounds us constantly. So I guess,
mm,
each person decides how they wanna. I mean, I go to houses where the TV is open 24/7. 24/7. It's never off.
mm.
So it's constant, because it's almost like if I think those people are afraid that if they don't watch it, they might miss out on something important or, something bad that is happening. It's not even
But
something important.
even
It's not like the
yeah, yeah.
queen is going to
Well, saying
resurrect and
bad,
come back to life.
but it's the news in America used to be Walter Cronkite at 7 o'clock. Now that kind of fell apart a little bit. But here, watching the news, it's an activity. And it's a social activity, especially, I mean, I
It's a
watch Channel
ritual.
12. It's a ritual. I don't really, I mean, I watched it during the war because it was on all the time, meaning I watched it for the reasons that you were describing. But, now that ritual is just very foreign to me in this country. That it's not only freedom, it's missing that form of community identification, I think.
Well, not for you, but I know that, most people and the majority, I'm not even talking about, but the majority of people do watch the news on 8 o'clock. And it's like when I go to my parents' house,
Mm.
the radio is always on. And when me and one of my siblings, come in, the first thing we do, we just go to the radio. It's like a big radio, like it's huge. And we just kind of push the button and we turn it off. We're like, we don't want that. Enough. But my dad like is constantly listening, watching, talking, he sees the country deteriorating, which is even, worse. This person was born actually, my dad was born in 1948. So he was born when the country, was born as well.
Mm.
So there's a really interesting trajectory of, him and Israel and
Wow.
going, he was he was in Sinai. I think it was Lebanon war. I'm not Lebanon. Lebanon was maybe the first Lebanon. See, there's so many wars. I'm not even sure which one he was. But
You should ask him.
it's interesting to see his point of view on things that are happening. where he can draw upon history and just say, well, it was like this. It was like, like you were talking about the Yom Kippur one, right? I mean, he was saying how I remember vividly. It was Yom Kippur, and we were speaking 2 years ago before our October 7th, and we were speaking about that day, and he was saying how he remembered that they were scared that Egyptian jeeps
Mm.
will come to Israel and just take over. And I was just like thinking, oh, really, like, and I couldn't relate to that fear, that panic of just feeling that everything could
It's
change
real.
in a
It's
second.
really right.
It's
Right.
very reminiscing of um, that book by Margaret Atwood,
Yeah.
where where she writes about how it was and then how it changed very quickly.
Mm.
Um, so,
Yeah.
and I
The
remember just
Handmaid's, the
thinking
Handmaid's
that
Tale. The Handmaid's
the
Tale.
Handmaid's Tale, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a beautiful, gorgeous book, but it also just really kind of reinforces how everything can change in a second. People think that, you become, a dictatorship in a second. It doesn't. Like I mean, in years, the opposite. It can come like in a second. You have to be on guard. And I remember not relating to that, that fear. And then October 7th happened, and I was just like, whoa, okay. I understand. I understand that panic. I understand that sense of helplessness.